Good morning, everyone. As Ali mentioned, my name is Emily Finnegan. I am one of our water project managers, and I am sad to not be with you all in person today, but thrilled to have you all online. As we learned from Daniel's overview this morning, land use planning and water management have historically been divorced, and this uncoordinated approach has led to the fragmented system that we have today. We now know that to address the complex, interconnected challenges of our future, including climate change, COVID-19, the economic recovery from the pandemic, and this drought, fire, flood cycle that we've discussed, we need to apply new ways of thinking and we need a systems approach. But this takes practice. We must unlearn the traditional single minded problem solving of the past and step back to analyze the larger systems at work. So, what is systems thinking? Traditional thinking looks at cause and effect. It's linear and simple. That's why people tend to use it. Systems thinking, however, involves examining the linkages and interactions between elements of the system. It's integrative, complex, it can be very confusing and frustrating, but it can lead to different, more holistic outcomes. In the example you see on the screen, a traditional thinker, um, which may be one that you can relate to, you may be feeling tired every day. A traditional thinker may decide to drink more coffee throughout the day to keep themselves awake, which I am guilty of. Whereas a systems thinker approaches this differently. They reflect on the problem as a whole and all of the factors that impact their energy levels and their sleep. And with this systems approach, they identify that actually drinking coffee, which was their band aid solution to their exhaustion, is actually disrupting their sleep. So they decide to stop drinking coffee altogether. Now, this is a small example, but it highlights how taking a systems approach can lead to more meaningful outcomes, again, that look holistically at our issues. So, what are some habits of a systems thinker? They tend to look at the big picture to recognize recurring patterns and relationships between factors. They recognize how the broader structural makeup of the system influences its behavior, with a focus on cause and effect relationships. Taking the systems approach allows you to identify unintended consequences and leverage points to change the system, and it allows us to test those assumptions before taking action. Systems thinkers resist the tendency to jump to quick conclusions because they understand the many players and factors involved in decision making. Throughout history, we've tended to take the traditional approach to natural resource management, where we've disconnected our human or our socio systems and the natural ecological systems, and we've viewed humans as separate from nature. As such, humans have always tried to dominate our natural resources. Man was believed to be the highest evolved creature, greater than all other organisms, including women who are apparently equal with whales in this diagram and only slightly greater than dogs. And man was able to control all of the natural world. And I want to encourage you to see this pyramid as individual sectors as well. All people see themselves at the top of the pyramid. We can't add multiple pyramids, but you can imagine that water was a commodity to be fought over, and that competition and dominance characterize each sector's approach to natural resource management. As we heard earlier, the history of California water was the tale of building pipes, dams, and cement channels to pull water from where it naturally flows into where humans need or want it to be. But trying to master the natural system with gray infrastructure inherently and indirectly keeps the self-sustaining green infrastructure system from playing its role in the natural environment. And this is actually a construction of the LA River channelization. And we constructed entire cities on this mindset, hard infrastructure engineered to solve one problem at a time while externalizing all others, and trying to master our natural resources with gray infrastructure and in general over reliance on the role that gray infrastructure plays. But what we've seen is that this point in time decision making, single problem, single solution, isolated thinking is not working. What we built is being unmade by the passage of time. The green infrastructure and natural system thrives on its own. It will outlive us. And instead of trying to work against these natural systems and the drought, fire, flood cycle, we need to think in tandem with our natural cycles. John Muir famously said, when we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. And that really underscores this point that anything we do as humans in our social or our built infrastructure impacts our natural systems that we depend on for our survival. In mindset and in managerial practice, we must reimagine, restructure how we as humans and society as a whole interact with natural flows. So, why are we talking about this? What does systems thinking have to do with integrated regional water management, or IRWM? We chose to start the session with an emphasis on systems and social ecological systems in particular, because systems thinking forms the foundation of IRWM. I'm not going to go into that now. My colleague Danielle will later, but this at its core, IRWM seeks to consider how regional water management as a system might share linkages with a wide spectrum of fields and concepts, such as land use planning, agriculture, industry, recreation, and environmental quality. Now let's look at a system at work. A causal map shows relationships within a system, and particularly between actions and effects, which helps us better understand the system of interacting parts. To construct a system, we begin by writing the problem in the center of a piece of paper and listing all of the factors that influence that problem. At our last round of workshops, we did this in teams, and this photo is actually an example from our round one Riverside County workshop, where one group was diagramming how to address lack of access to clean, healthy water. So once all factors are listed, as you saw in the last photo, we start to draw arrows between factors that seem related. In this example, perhaps you're trying to understand why you're always late to school. You diagram the factors in your system. You're tired in the morning, so it's difficult to focus during school, which leaves you with more work to do after school and therefore forces you to go to bed late, just to find yourself waking up after your alarm yet again the next morning. And as the individual drawing this systems map connects the arrows between these factors, we begin to see the relationships which help us identify opportunities and leverage points. In this system, I notice a positive reinforcing feedback loop. The later I go to bed, the later I wake up and arrive late to school. So I decide to go to bed early on Sunday evening, and I'm well rested and arriving to school on time all week. And another example, we're trying to understand how more cars on the road impacts a community. We see that as driving increases, street safety decreases, which discourages other forms of active transportation like biking and walking. More cars on the road also leads to more emissions, and we can imagine continuing to build this system out to include air quality, rates of asthma, number of sidewalks and bike lanes, access to parks, etc., to better understand the connections and relationships between all of these many factors. And we can do this for just about any public policy challenge. This map is a little overwhelming. I'm sure we can share the link in the chat to an interactive map that was developed to identify all of the factors influencing successful implementation of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or SGMA. I don't have time to go into the details of this map now, but if you want to explore it via that link in the chat, you can see how all the factors in the system relate to one another. And we've used this systems map as part of a larger statewide NGO effort to identify leverage points and opportunities for intervention within the larger SGMA implementation process. The problems that we encounter in California water resource management are often complex, as we've heard. They're interjurisdictional and socially complex. You'll need a systems thinking approach to progress towards any solution. But the good news is we have all of the technology, information, and ability to solve these problems. We just need the political will to get it done, which is why we've invited all of you here as elected officials and local leaders to help us build that political will and go about it the right way, the systems way. But as I said before, it takes practice to move beyond the traditional cause and effect thinking and take a systems approach. Your workshop completion activity is going to ask you to identify a local water challenge and examine the broader system at work influencing that challenge. And you are sent a copy of this worksheet with the agenda ahead of this call if you want to open it and take a look. While the worksheet doesn't ask you to diagram your system, we highly encourage you to revisit this presentation and try to map out the factors at work influencing your local water issue. You may be surprised at the connections and leverage points that you find.